and just in general. And we want copies of all your meeting minutes. We want copies of all of your agendas, and they're not public meetings.
Sounds like a Brian problem.
It's AOC. It's a AOC and AOCPD issue. Association of Oregon County Planning Directors. So like OASIS and other things, we have our own group. Yeah.
I guess we're going. We're good to go. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Commissioners Board Briefings, January 7th, 2026. Today's number one topic is Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development, to talk about community advisory committees.
Thank you, Chair Fournier. It's a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
to be here. Okay, so sent the board a memorandum with a couple of attachments. And I guess just to start the conversation, I think one thing that's important to preface is this is probably the first of many. And with that, with what was in the staff report and recommendations, tried to keep it high level with an explanation of a background and summary for readers who may not have all of the history or information. Did not set any real specific examples of, I would say, highlights of CAC activity that we have all witnessed or experienced or discussed over the last couple of years. But I think we are really at this crossroads in terms of what is their role? What does the county envision their role to be? What do they envision their role to be? And then how do we meet everybody's expectations with staffing, resources, et cetera, to get to where we all want to go and be with our relationships? And so I would say I can break down the report into a couple of themes with those recommendations. One is focus on the role of the CACs and what their scope of activity should be. Part of that is the board order from 2013 still relevant? Does it need to be updated? Does it need to be modified? And then with that is the option of, are we at a place to where we can still afford both in financial resources and staffing resources to continue to support them as CACs and have CACs. Washington County, as I wrote in my report, is going through the same thing right now for very similar reasons. The other thing is then, what are their operational needs as we anticipate in the future, and can we meet those? What types of county resources do we have, and do those needs need to be adjusted based on availability of resources? The financial component for some of these CACs as they currently operate is something that needs some serious attention. But also, I think it's important to note as CACs like NETARTS or new CACs like Neocani are increasing in their activity, they have desires to have their own website, to have their own email addresses, their own Zoom subscription accounts, and the costs of that. And there's a few uncomfortable places with the financial element of this discussion. And I think one of them is just the donations. Some, are finding ways like through the Oceanside Protection Society, who is funding costs for some of the Oceanside Neighborhood Association activities. Is that okay? And then others are saying, well, but if they get to take donations, why can't we? And I'm not saying anybody can take donations. In fact, I'm saying they can't, right? And I think there's a lot of unknown activity on our end as to how they are getting the financial means they need to do the things they want to do. And then with that, working with Deborah, is if we did decide to set up a special revenue fund or a fund that's part of the planning fund of the general fund, what does that look like? What can we afford to put in those accounts? If we take donations or we have a reimbursement program, what should that process look like? Deborah and Christy have been amazing in helping me kind of figure out, based on what we can do and what we do with other groups, But the CACs continue to be unique in that their funding needs are different in terms of we're not funding meals and mileage and travel, we're funding tools and resources. And then the public retention and public meeting law requirements associated with that and balancing that with their desire for autonomy. And then how do we then work through, as they evolve and become, I would say, more engaged in other political matters. Some, as we've seen, have become, there's been concerns about them becoming more like a political adversarial group. We've seen community division from that. And then just their demands for service, and including they want to work on roads, they want to be engaged in road maintenance schedules, they want me to do more work with their zoning programs, they want individualized short-term rental programs, and is that where the board envisions we are walking into the future? So I would say those 5 pages, that probably summarizes where we're at, and if you have any questions, happy to take those and stop for a minute.
Thank you for starting this conversation. I feel like we'll be discussing this probably multiple times, and appropriately so. I'm sensitive to the fact that Brian has just joined us, so I just want to offer, and you may already know this from Cook County, but I just want to offer that we have these citizens advisory committees for the unincorporated communities that are not cities, and they're Sarah does amazing work. She's the project lead for these. She does amazing work with the citizens, with advisory committees, and I have observed personally a bunch of the things that you're talking about that they want. Some of them would like to be autonomous. They would like to function like city councils. They want the supports of city government, and so there's a lack of clarity about what exactly what you just brought up, what we can afford to do, what we can staff, what the mission is, and I think the very important question about how to support them in their desire to be involved and at what level. So I think this is a terrific conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a conversation that is very timely. It's one we need to have. We created them with a very specific purpose in the very beginning, and there definitely has been what potentially would be called mission creep, I suppose, where we have also drawn upon them for other things. So some of it's been driven by them, some of it's been driven by us, because we're like, hey, because we have all of these unincorporated communities with no structure per se, that we want to have communication with, we use the CACs. We're like, they've got a mailing list. Let's put it on that, right? So we have asked for some of this, which has definitely created this very sort of gray area of what exactly they're there to do, what exactly they're allowed and not allowed to do. And so it is definitely time for a conversation to reevaluate their purpose and their need and their needs under whatever purpose we determine we have for them.
I agree with both my colleagues, but I would also add too, I think not only the mission creep, I would agree with, but I feel like the board order that was created assisted in that.
Uh-huh.
So there'll be lots of conversations about that. It's because it's like it's very certain this is this, but then we also want you to do this, and so.
Here's something that other duties is assigned.
Yeah,
It's sort of one of the bullets on this, right? So it's not their fault.
Right, what I was gonna say, we're not blaming and we're not saying that. But
Nope.
we can't even do that because it says right in here, basically, everything.
Yeah.
We want you to do everything.
Yeah.
All areas, everything. So I'm glad we're having this conversation too. I think we're all aware of, maybe we need to figure out how we go forward differently. So.
Yeah, and the different communities, you have Oceanside that has multiple actual groups, and then you have Netarts, which has just the newly formed CAC, but I think they look at Oceanside and go, Oceanside can do all these things. We want to do all these things, right? So not necessarily understanding or recognizing that Oceanside does have more than one group. So yeah, it's definitely a good conversation and complex.
And I want to add, because I'm sure you have a lot more to present, but I just want to say too, and I think I'm speaking for you, but if I'm both of you, but if not, we don't want to discourage any of the wonderful stuff that's happening that may have been outside the parameters of the original idea of these. So we need to figure a way of capturing it, because we don't want to discourage that either. It just might not be, this might not be the right place for that, but I want to make sure that I'm conscious of how valuable a lot of this input is, so.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think everything is on the table when it says, and item number 4 under Order 13-034, there's also a desire by the board to have the CACs in the unincorporated areas advise the board on non-planning related items of interest to the board and community. So, we kind of just opened it right there. And so I think that is important, and I appreciate you putting it really clearly, Paul, because this is right now, I don't see any of our CAC members with us today because they don't know that this conversation is happening, because that wasn't the intent of today's work. The intent of today's work is for us to kind of dig in and get our heads on straight. But I expect that there will be listening to this recording at a later date. And so I appreciate you highlighting, and I think we do want to highlight that item number 4 is exactly what these groups have done at the behest and request, really, of the county commission or boards before us and us, as we've come into it. So no shame, no blame.
Yeah.
It's just a good time for clarification, and with the public meetings laws pieces that are coming into play, we really do have to be more cognizant, more aware. And with the virtual meetings, which you talked about in your memo, how that's really changed participation in these different groups, and therefore also changed, I would say, the breadth of what the conversations probably are that are being had. So we're in a new time, in a new space, and it is time to redefine, but nothing that anybody has done is being construed as bad or wrong.
Nope.
So I think that is important to get on the record. Thank
And
you.
one final thing on that is also some of their desire for more autonomy is not possible because of the structure currently. So
That is correct.
we're open to everything. We just want to explore all the options.
And I think with all of that, number 12 talks about insurance cover under the torts claim.
I saw
tort
that
claim.
one.
So
Yeah.
with
Yeah, I highlighted
council,
that one.
I think that's also something we need to be really cognizant of. And I think one of the first next steps after this discussion is that we hold that annual meeting with the chairs and the planning commission. And maybe that's the start of a conversation with them, because these are my observations. But hearing from them firsthand, what do you need? What do you want? What do you see your future as? What's working? What's not? But the planning commission engagement in that conversation, I think, is also relevant, because they also have their own experience and takeaways of how the CACs are functioning and what's working and what's not. And so I think that holistic approach, especially going back to their initial charge of participation in the county's land use program, will be insightful for all of us. One of the things I talk about at the end of the memo is, do we also just want to limit it to these CACs of unincorporated communities? We have the Cape Mears Community Association that does amazing work. We have the Tierra Del Mar Community Association that does amazing work. They are not identified or appointed as CACs because they don't have the same status under Oregon land use laws of unincorporated communities. But they're communities nonetheless. They have the same challenges, they have the same desires, they want to participate. I think we have this hybrid with them where we work with them, in a very similar fashion, but they're just not listed. So should we include them? Right? And the other thing is, if this model does not work because of limited staffing resources and their desire for autonomy, is there a way we can acknowledge them as community groups, maintain the integrity and the relevance of them, provide services, but pull them out of this order? And they work independently so they can do the things that currently they're not, permitted to do. They could take donations, they can get 501c status. Rachel and I have had that conversation with a few of them, that is not possible because of the limitations of being under the county organization umbrella. So is that another option?
I appreciate that. One thing that occurred to me is that the new public meetings laws are so complicated, and I think that that for our CACs, if they're going to continue, they all need to be trained in public meetings laws, and then they'll need to be willing to do it correctly, to be compliant. And it's possible that there are groups that would rather be a community organization than a CAC and avoid all of that difficulty, because it really is difficult. We're asking a lot of community groups to be compliant with public meetings law.
Right. And in some instances, like Oceanside, the whole purpose for the formation of the Oceanside Protection Society was because of the limitations of the Oceanside CAC. That group was intentionally formed to do things that the ONA couldn't. And then in Nescoen, you have the Nescoen Community Association, which is a 501c, but they don't have interest in participating in some of the things that other communities want. So then you have this hybrid of they are all participating in all of the same organizations, and sometimes they adjourn one meeting and start the other just to separate things they can do as a CAC and things they can't. And I'm not sure that's a healthy structure either.
I don't think that's a healthy structure, and I think some of those groups are designed to literally litigate against the decision of the other group.
Right.
I think one of the problems, and that might be part of this discussion, is when the county changed it from a citizen planning advisory committee to a CAC. It took the word planning out of it, even though the intent was to be involved in planning and land use. And I'm wondering, as part of this, if we consider restructuring what a CAC is maybe changing it or putting somewhere in there so the name of it is very clear what it is. And this is what this group is doing, and then all these other groups are doing all these other community stuff with the autonomy, with the freedom to do that, because they're not acting as a county advisory committee, which is covered by our tort, which has to have public meetings, follow public meetings law. So I think maybe putting that name, putting the purpose back in the name would be less confusing than, right now it just sounds like, and because of the other things in that order.
There were some
It says-
negotiations in that order. It was
Yeah,
a contentious process.
I understand the intent, and it worked, and it got, I mean, and the remote option, the hybrid option is getting a lot more involvement, because now we have property owners, 50% of them don't live here, so they're now able to comment more, which is great, because they own the property there. So I just wanted to notice that, like, I noticed that's like, you took it out of the name, we shouldn't be surprised that it's broadened and evolved or devolved into something else.
Right, and I think where we choose to go, I think Sarah's brought up a really important point, and as you said, Washington County's grappling with the same one, which is, how do we support these groups? Where does the staff time come from? Where does the money come from? Because if you look at it right now, Sarah is who is supporting these groups. And if you look at the amount of time she spends supporting these groups, it's substantial. I mean, I couldn't put a dollar amount to it off the top of my head, but with just probably a back of an envelope and a little time, we could do that, and probably we would all be a little bit shocked by what this is costing the county. And it's not a bad thing that we're doing it, but it could be at the cost of other things that the county could or should be doing. And as we look at what's going to happen with FEMA and how that may impact what has to happen out of Sarah's department, there's going to be a challenge sitting in front of us resource-wise. There already is, quite frankly. If you look at what our customers of the community development department, being those who are building things, would really like to have in the way of customer service, they don't always get it because we're doing other things such as this. So I think there is a resource conversation that happens as a part of this as well, because I mean, if resources were no object, I love the fact that our unincorporated communities get to have a voice and a bit of a vision and to have a say in what their community becomes. I love that Visit Tillamook Coast has done visioning with some of them, around what tourism facilities they'd like to see. And, they've used the CACs as that group through which to really start the work, publicize the work, center the work, right? So I love all that. I don't want any of that to go away. And I'm not sure how we better structure it and continue to fund it. So I think all of that has to kind of be surfaced in this conversation.
No, go ahead. I was going to see if we could move on to some of the financial stuff that Deborah's here to talk about too.
Yes, definitely. To close the loop on that part of the conversation, one of the things that I've talked about is if we look at what their role is, and to your point, department resources and staff engagement. Because right now, most months, it's 3 Saturdays usually of my time and at least one evening meeting a week that is just dedicated to these groups. And I've been happy to do it, but it's been a ton of, it's been a lot of work. But with that, one of the things that I've thought about is if there was a way to give them more independence, focus on things like Tillamook Visitors Association and other things, but to where maybe in this board order we talk specifically about a land use subcommittee or a development subcommittee that could encompass short-term rentals and other things, where they have these subcommittees and they have a chair. One of the things that we could look at is my focus then steps away from the committee at large, and resources are intentionally allocated to these specific things. So they can still meet, they can have all those good people come, share all that information. But in that piece, the other thing, because each one of them is siloed to the extent to where they are not aware of the fact that there are other communities that we serve. We are doing all these community plan updates. There's a ton of resources and attention being given to a few communities. And I've got communities where we have not touched their community plans or done any work since 1995 or later. Cloverdale is a great example of that. We hear from Ms. Kazin and others routinely. In working with them specifically and maybe having a quarterly meeting just with them, it would be to help them or give them an opportunity to give me input on an annual work plan, to where I say, we're working in Cloverdale right now, which means you're not working on your community plan and doing all this independent land use work without me, right? Which we've seen the pitfalls of that, because I have to work here. It's this time, but getting that buy-in and that agreement from all the chairs and the leaders of those committees, they can go back to the committee at large and be like, yeah, we know that we want to do this, but we've all agreed to support this community in their needs this year. And that would also maybe create some awareness, because I don't think they really understand there's other places. I've got some communities that really want all of our attention, but I've got to do work in these other areas too, and they deserve it.
These are, I appreciate everybody surfacing all of these issues, and something I just want to say for posterity, in case people are in fact watching this later, is that the citizen involvement enriches our communities so much. And so when you're talking about that, I'm thinking the communities that want the most are the most they're the most dynamic. They're the communities that are rich with people who have so much to offer. They have so many ideas, things they want to do, ways they want to be involved, and they need help to get there. And the communities that don't have those people, don't have those structures, they suffer. So I think that we're trying to thread the needle about how to encourage that, but not take all of it on ourselves. Or if we were to take it on, how would we? So it's a very interesting. We don't want to discourage, as you both said, discourage any of that, and yet I don't know that we can provide it.
Right. And I would say for me, one thing I feel strongly about is they don't like to wait for the county to be available to do land use and zoning code updates. And that is one area they really need to wait for us.
Yeah.
When they start doing their own work and they don't, I think we've seen 2 recent examples of what's resulted in those good intentions and doing the work without me and saying, well, we know you're busy, so we're just going to start anyway. And we'll see you later and give you these documents. What it sets up is this untenable situation to where I don't want to offend them and, pull their work apart when I have to explain why 2 years of what they've poured into this body of work can't come forward. Like, those are things I would like to mitigate because I'm really worried about that.
Well, yes, of course. Yeah. And it's awkward. I know of a situation where a group said, hey, this is what we want you to take to the commissioners. Yeah. So we have to we have to set up the parameters in a way that everybody understands them.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi, Deborah, thanks for being here.
not a problem. Sarah asked me to join, so I thought I'd speak a little bit to the financial piece on this. As a quasi-government entity, we can reimburse these CACs. However, they don't quite fall under our expenditure policies. They aren't aware of our guidelines on spending and authorities. So I would just like to make sure that we get some guardrails in place for proper expenditure reimbursement on these, as well as consider staff timing if we are looking at bringing them on and taking on donations for them. What does that look like for banking administration and staff time our office?
We've got, I think, 6, 7 active CACs,
Yeah.
so it's what we talked about right now. We add Cloverdale back into the mix or some sort of Nestucca Valley CAC, that will increase the need for resources and staffing for many reasons.
I appreciate you looking at that, and that is a huge part of this.
Sean and I have tried over the last couple of years to come up with a process to do some of that work. I've collected receipts. We've talked about reimbursements, but unfortunately, Sean and I never got this far. So I also appreciate you diving into this and helping me figure out how we can work with the commissioners to build that path and what that process looks like going forward.
So just curious on these expenditures, which obviously they weren't $10,000 when we started doing these. So again, to go back to the other point is those expenditures, how much of them are related to actual planning and land use issues, and how many are part of the other stuff that it's involved? Because are we, did we do that mission creep and that added all this money, and now we're adding all this more staff time, and we're adding, because if we go back and just be mission specific and focused on what the role of these could be, I'm not gonna say should, could be, and then figure that part out and what that includes for staff time and cost. And then we have these other discussions of encouraging these other community groups to do all the other stuff that they want to do, and how can we help them separately of that? Because we need that work, as we just found out. That's by law. We have to, we're following state law for the planning stuff, and we need that work to get done, and that's what these groups need to help us with.
Right.
So
So under Goal 1, with statewide planning Goal 1, which has all of the laws that require citizen involvement and engagement in our land use program, how most counties satisfy that requirement and cities is through the Planning Commission, because that's the minimum. So I think part of this other conversation is understanding we have satisfied those requirements. This is extra, and no one else does this like we do. And I'm proud of that. I think that's a great thing. In terms of their needs, any copying of surveys, copies of other materials, usually it's department focused. If they make copies of other things, they're doing them on their own. So what I'm doing through the department is what I know is specific and relevant to our work through community development. It may not all be land use. Some of it could be short-term rentals. Some of it could be other housing division related stuff, or every once in a while building stuff. But I think it is the materials that I am providing are appropriate to give them. The subscriptions for reimbursements would be things like their Zoom accounts. It would be for MailChimp, and their email accounts, and then website maintenance. We have these conversations annually about, like, there's not a lot of money. We're working on a refund or a reimbursement program, which I will tell you, they will share their frustrations that we haven't gotten that done yet. And I feel really bad about that. But the other piece of it, in light of these other concerns about compliance with public meetings, public records, number 12, the tort matter, do we want them maintaining their own websites, right? So there's the cost piece of the subscription that we could reimburse them for. It's mostly land use, but they do put other things in. I think also like in Neatarts, Roger, who spent $1,700 over the summer on this beautiful website for the Neatarts community. And I had to explain to him after I found out that I couldn't reimburse him for those costs. These were decisions made without me and outside of the CAC, but very well intentioned for the boat launch and beautification project. And then they want to put emergency management stuff on it and different things. So there is some nexus to land use with those costs, but they want other things tied to that.
So let me ask you this, and this is, everybody else might know this, I don't know this. Because I'm thinking of, again, this is turned into this, and I'm trying to figure out, for the reasons that we're all saying, the tort reasons, the meeting law reasons, it behooves us as a county to protect our liability and to control expenditure, these, reimbursements, which is gonna get us in trouble if we don't do it right, meeting laws, which is gonna get us in trouble. So my question is, because some of this stuff gets muddied because it has to do with land, how much, and I think of the budget committee, Mike, like when we call them, we're having them meet with us more now, right? But it's a public meeting, we're doing it. How much through a normal year are we, or are they involved in actual, like we just were with the middle housing? How often is realistic for them to be meeting if they're purely micro-focused on stuff that you say? Because I would argue that you're the one that says, this is a good one for this group to be a part of. This other stuff is good for those community groups that want to beautify a boat ramp or get a road district going or something. So I guess my question is there a way for us to parse all that out and still, again, still support it, but to protect ourselves as a county and to reduce that liability and cost? How often?
I think just for things that I know that I work with them on, quarterly meetings would be sufficient, or even bi-monthly. I think some of them could be consolidated, but still maintain individuality, which is something I think I touch on in that report. One of their fears may be that without the strong engagement of the county in all things CAC, their attendance and community interest could dwindle. And so they may be reluctant or have some concerns about that approach just because it's our stuff that's the exciting stuff that gets people there, right? And that being said, though, one of the comments we heard in a recent hearing was, I'm afraid to miss a meeting because there may be consequences to my development rights or something to me, right? So I think we have to find that balance.
Yeah, I would argue or suggest maybe we look at these as a subcommittee of their own groups.
Right.
So then we are supporting the quarterly meetings or whatever you decide. Again, we're just brainstorming here. But if you decide quarterly is a good number for this, for our official meetings where we have to follow all these rules, I mean, for that matter, maybe we provide a copy machine for them or whatever, but if it's quarterly for that, I hear what you're saying about, but I don't like you missing 3 Saturdays of a month because it helps attendance at their meetings because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Your time is very valuable. So I'm just wondering, is it more of where it could be a subcommittee of their regular, let's just use NETARTS. They have a NETARTS community, if they want to keep the name because we changed this name. And then the subcommittee is the planning and land use subcommittee. And then they report to that group.
Like the CPAC, go back to a CPAC.
Yes, where they would report to the regular community group that's doing all this stuff. But then we are managing this subcommittee as our committee. It'd be the county-run committee where we have a better handle on all these other things. So that committee's not taking donations. That committee, those members are not. There's a finite number of members of that. I don't know, I'm just.
Well, one of the things that's nice about that structure is it gives me the ability to lead and drive the land use work and give them things to react and respond to versus me reacting and responding to what they're giving me in writing and trying to figure out how to make it work, right? And it might actually speed up my process to do my work if we had that type of approach, because then it's not those weekly meetings of words and, additional explanation of different things. I'm doing the work, getting it to them, meeting with them, coming back. And then all of those meetings are scheduled under our quarterly structure and could be through Teams and other things where we then also have the public records. And I have the meetings on Teams. We do have a CAC page on the department website because restarting NETARTS, starting Neocani, I had to put their documents somewhere, right? And so you can go onto that page and you can see I've got all the, you can go to their page specifically within that, the CAC page, and see all of their meeting documents. I've got all the meeting recordings because I've been able to manage all of that.
So to follow my little path here, and I'm sorry, just tell me that you want to jump in whenever you want to jump in. I don't know.
I just wanted to say, good idea. Let's come back to that.
Well, part of that good idea is what and this is more of a question, is if we followed the thread that we're going down right now, and we did make it, we'll call it a subcommittee for now, but of all these groups that meets quarterly for now. For instance, the latest middle housing thing, for an example, I feel like your time could be saved because now you have a subcommittee of less people. You could meet with all of them from each one of them perhaps,
That's right.
and do one meeting to give them the overview, and then individually how they affect each of their communities, which is a huge time saver for our staff
Right.
and cuts down on meetings. And I would have to ask Brian or somebody, because the public meeting laws, if we're following all the rules for this subcommittee, is there anything that would prevent, well, it's a public meeting, so everybody can watch it. All those people, members of the CAC can watch it. There's no reason why those people that were sitting there in the room with you can't go back and share what their thoughts were about that meeting. Because if that meeting's public, this one's not.
Well, and I could do them at the port, like I did the
Right.
STR advisory committee. I mean, there's a structure to where if we broaden it to ensure there's wider community engagement and participation, we've got a proven model for that also meets all of the public meeting law and public retention requirements.
I think that having a smaller group that is informed by the larger group in their own meetings, and they basically compel them, they tell them what they would like to bring to you, is a huge time saver. Because I've seen these meetings, we've all seen these meetings where we want that involvement, but you have a lot of work to do from that thing. And I'd rather have them talk it over with each other than meet with you and just try to make it more efficient. We're trying to do a lot of things more efficiently, and this feels like it's spiraling financially and time-wise, which makes more time for a new county council because we have a lot more legal questions appearing because of this.
Well, and if there's a way that we could recognize them with that approach to still ensure that they feel a sense of validity in their role with the county. The other thing is, like Deborah and I talked about, maybe we allocate $500 annually to each one, to where if they need to buy an owl, so they can meet independently of us, or something to give them some resources, that's a very different conversation than upwards of $1,000 to $1,200 for each group to do the same thing, because I'm taking the costs on through the department for a more streamlined approach.
I would also argue that the county involvement they're getting a lot of that risk, because if they have a question about roads, Chris has been showing up. If they have a question about solid waste, Justin can show up. Like they're still getting, I mean, I would still be encouraging our directors to be
Right.
doing it. Just doesn't have to be only you every time, every week.
Well, and part of what I've been trying to do is introduce these other opportunities to get them away from political issues like land use, because it's not good for their community health. So why don't we have Justin come talk about solid waste programs, or have Michelle Yank come and talk about community wellness, things that are still meaningful to the community, showcase county services. And part of that could be if we keep the chairs or the presidents of each of those organizations, maybe I meet with them, every 6 months, and we talk about who's available from the county or others as speakers that are willing to come to their regular meetings. It also means, you may be able to attend them more or be some of those guest speakers because we've pulled the land use element out of those general meetings.
I would argue, though, I would say that we could also divide those groups and assign liaisonships too. So they feel like they have at least a contact person on the board, but
They love it when you guys come to their meetings. They really appreciate
not
it.
that we need another board to be a
Need
part
another
of.
meeting.
Washington
commissions do.
County had theirs set up as districts because they weren't land use focused. So every commissioner had a district that they took. And one of their options they're exploring right now is to combine those districts, consolidate them for quarterly meetings with a commissioner appointed liaison.
I think our communities would struggle with being pushed together. Maybe not. You would know better than I would, but I think the autonomy that
Yeah.
we've talked about is important to our communities, and our communities are, in many cases, a bit geographically separated and have issues specific to them and communities specific to them related to their geographic isolation. So I think there is a piece there that it would be hard potentially for us to drop from the 7/8 that we have downward, and have them still feel like they were
I would
getting their
agree.
needs met.
I think that I think that they've proven that they are separate and
So,
they should
so
be
there are 8, so we'll go with that. So I think I'm hearing that I was trying to kind of tease apart the many functions that each of these groups were meeting, because I completely agree that land use so I agree a number of things that you just said, Paul. One is risk management is at the heart of this for us. We need to make sure that as a county, we are pulling back into something that we can legally manage and financially manage. So I completely agree with that piece of it, for sure. And so if you just carve out that land use piece and build that only and say, this is how this can happen. They're all going to be remote. They're going to be on Teams. Sarah or someone in her department is going to set them up and make them happen. They will be convened either whether it's on a regular schedule or as needed related to land use. And it will be topics that you bring to them, as you've suggested, that they react to, as opposed to them generating content, right? So I feel like that's something we can pull back into and make sure that we're meeting all of our risk pieces of it. I think the other part of it then is what we're hearing is that really they're developing it in the absence of government, in some cases as quasi-government for their little community. In other cases, it's not that well developed. I think these could go a lot of different directions, and without our participation, some of that could be good. Some of that could be really frightening, right, as to what they develop into and believe that they have the right and or authority to take on and do, so that if we were to each of us get 2.5 of them as liaisonships, we would have to be very clear, not only what is the land use function that the county will support, we would also have to be exceptionally clear about what is the function overall that the county can and will support, because they will have questions about roads. They will have questions about, the access to the beach in Oceanside was a big project. It worked out great, but there's been a lot of concern and, why isn't the county helping us more with infrastructure things we want here? So we would have to really define and decide what is it that we're going to support them in doing? What is it that the county will give? Where is the line for what the county won't give, can't give? How do we do that? So that they can go ahead and move in their autonomous ways to create what their community most needs, but be really clear that if they come up with this great huge infrastructure plan and bring it back to the county, it doesn't mean we're going to do it, right? So I think there is that piece where it can get a little wild with them feeling then that they are the government of that particular community. So there's certainly more conversation to be had with them as well.
That's why I like the idea of the separation, like you said in the beginning of that.
Yeah.
I almost see this for an AOC comparison. I
Yep.
see these CACs or CPACs as more of a steering committee for the planning commission. Like they're making recommendations, so maybe that's a new word for them. Maybe they're a steering committee, which is not making a final decision, but it's making a recommendation. Because that's what we're saying, but we also say this needs to be clean, or the original ordinance needs to be clean, we know that. But so I agree with everything you said about that. I think there's two separate things going on at least, right? One is we need this community planning, land use committee. We want that. We want that. And we want to make sure that we're reducing our liability. But then we also need to figure out the other component of what's the other piece of it?
Because how do we be clear what the county's role is going to be? And I think, Knee Charts is another great example. They came to us about Knee Charts Park, right? And we were really excited that a group had come together. There's been a group that had been working on it for years, maintaining and, trying to do it. But then they came to us with a plan and we agreed, oh gosh, well, we would like to help. But I think we have to be clear if we set up these groups to say, you'll have a liaison with the county and the county will do what we can to support you. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't want, to your point, they can spend a lot of time, just as they did in some of the planning environments, they could spend a lot of time creating their vision for their community with an expectation that we're going to step in and make things happen that we may or may not be able to do. So I think there has to be some clarity that you are an unincorporated community. You do not have a local government at this time. We are your government, but we are going to be unable to provide you with a designated law enforcement officer, a special roads plan, all the things that we have had probably asks made of us through these communities over time, but being really clear in the beginning that what you all want to come together and, do is great. We hope you will come together and maybe apply for grants for, Visit Tillamook Coast for signage or the things that are available out there. But as a county, we're not saying that we're going to support you in acting as the local government because we have assigned a liaison to you and created a planning arm for you, right? So it's that clarity, and I don't think we know what that clarity is exactly.
I think we know what it is.
I know what it isn't. Item number
If we
4
took
is
this
other
board order,
anything.
We had our staff, we're like, this is a good conversation, like, what is it? Like, this is what we can help you with this group. Knee Charts Park's a good example where they did do that, and
They did a great job.
what I love about some of these programs, and I want to just highlight this in the middle of this conversation is, so Tim Carpenter's my neighbor, and he's a big one in the park. And I said, are you gonna put in for any TLT? And they formed a nonprofit. He goes, we're gonna try to raise some money on our own. And I love that idea of keeping their own skin in the game. Like
Yep.
we want these groups to build these kind of strong communities, to come up with these great ideas, but also have their expectations be accurate. Make sure we manage their expectations, because the original, this ordinance, it's a free-for-all. And it well-intended, but it just is what happens when it's almost like the way tourism has evolved. Like, there was set up a specific way to promote tourism. Now that we promote it, we have to evolve how we manage it. Now it's about managing it. We wanted to promote this involvement. We got that with this order and these groups, and now we have to manage how they evolved and make sure that they're still doing the job we need them to do, while still encouraging them to continue to do what they're doing, knowing what our limitations and what their limitations are.
Right, and during this time of sort of transition, if that's the direction we would decide to go, I think being able to provide with them, here's a model of how this can fit together, right? If your community wants to create an organization, be it a 501c3, in order to fund things that you want to fund, and this would be a committee they're in, and this committee, when it meets, would be, seated by the county. If we could give them that model, and we could say, these are the kinds of things that other communities have done that are beneficial, that, things that don't require the county at all. Oceanside is working on trying a negotiation with a cell company to bring in a cell tower, because that's important to their community. We don't have a role in that as county government, but that group has come together and figured that out, and they're going to, working to bring that to their community. Great to me, unless there's something I don't know about what they did, that should have included the county and didn't, but
They're doing trails out there.
they're doing
focusing
trails,
on
correct.
interactions, which is fantastic.
Right, so they're doing some good things autonomously as they can, and they should. And so if we can figure out what the model might look like as a recommended model, the community can then take it and do what they will with it, of course. But I think it would be helpful to not just leave it wide open.
I agree. And one of the things, like, so I think if we did a hybrid of liaisonships, I think and designed it that way, I think they would be very encouraged by that, because they only see me and a couple of others like Chris, and they do get really excited when you guys come. So maybe it's managing those meeting expectations, even if they choose to keep a community group to where you go to a quarterly meeting, right, or whatever it is. But by pulling out the land use piece, bylaws become very simplified. Each CPAC that focused on, I would say even community development matters. So it's not just land use, but if we wanted to go back and talk about short-term rentals again, or housing work or some of those other things, design those CPACs in a way to where each one has a chair. So I do have that point of contact. And then the CPAC doesn't have a treasurer, it doesn't have a secretary, it doesn't have
Right.
these things because we go back to the format of we will take care of the virtual meetings, we will take care of the public records, we
Right.
will take care of meeting announcements
And-
and all of those things.
And I would suggest that rather than list all the things STRs, I would just say at the discretion of the director,
Yeah,
would engage with this steering committee or group
right.
on issues relating to community development and planning. And that way it's your decision whether you,
Thank you.
uh,
I appreciate that. And there will still be crossover like with county parks
Right.
or public works because there's always a land use and a community development nexus to any work. We're talking about it with the boat launches, right? So I think there's space there. And then I think what helps you is when you come to a meeting, they want to tell you all the things about the roads or they want design standards that regulate aesthetics. You have a place to funnel them to the CPAC to where you're not engaging in conversations, especially if it's related to a current land use application under review that you might be the appeal body for. You know, you can funnel them back my way into the planning commission because that restores their charge and their role in that, and you're there to talk about other things.
and I was looking this up to make sure, for an example, the OAP in Oceanside asked me to go just to meet with them while they're discussing parking issues in Oceanside. And they asked me to show up and I said, and they were thrilled that I was going to show up. So I think you're right. I think that engagement from the board is important.
And if we took the OAP model and inserted a faction of that as a CPAC,
Right.
I think that maybe that's a baseline. Like I would love to work with Brian and Deborah and Rachel and put something together because it's going to require some orders and different things. Maybe we think about that concept and bring something back for you to think about. Well, maybe we do a listening session with the CAC
I was
chairs and
gonna
the
say,
planning commission.
Yeah, that would be the next, probably, is also to hear what is it that they find most valuable about the
Yes.
work that's currently being done. What is most valuable to them? Because what we think is most valuable to them may or may not be what they think is, right? So it would be great to hear from them as we think about building the model.
The building the model, yeah, because we can take that input then and put that into what we design.
Yeah.
In the meantime, business as usual.
Okay. Seems so.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
This is
I've been
good
waiting
stuff.
so long to have this
Important.
conversation.
So what about a timeline for how this begins to work? I know that there's a lot. I know Brian's on day 3.
He's got a list.
Day 2, day 3. And so he's figuring out his priorities. I know that Rachel is already about 6 to 12 months behind on all the other things we've already given her.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of her time would be needed for the project or process that we're talking about. And Deborah is currently the interim treasurer as well as the finance director and looking down the barrel of budget season. So all that
Other than
said,
that, we're fine.
other than that,
We're good,
we're
we're good.
fine.
There's-
Everybody has lots of time. So I want us to be thoughtful and realistic. I know you have been waiting a long time for this conversation. You and I have had it multiple times trying to, kind of queue it up and think about it.
So I have an idea.
Yeah, so talk to me
Okay.
about that.
So what I think, understanding all of this, because I agree, I think the next step, I will schedule a listening session and I will work with Debbie for availability. I think we should have it out at the port and hybrid because we're going to get more than the CAC chairs there, which I think is wonderful.
Mhm.
And I think we build in a public comment period to that. I think one of you, I don't know, Paul, your chair, Aaron, you are community development liaison. If one of you decide who starts the conversation, we can put an agenda together for that meeting because I think it also needs to be structured so it doesn't turn into a free-for-all. We want it to be productive and focused, right? So I will work on getting that set up maybe for next month before all the budget hearings and all of that part starts. And I think in the meantime, if everybody's comfortable, I can take a shot at putting a structure framework together that I give to all of you before that listening session, and we just keep it so that, because it's going to change once we hear from them, but at least I can take a first stab at putting that together. And then after that listening session, I think we reconvene maybe sometime in March, or I could work directly. I mean, I could reach out individually, start tweaking it, and then once I've got everybody's individual comments at the time they're available, come back at a board briefing and present the whole thing.
I have a question with that because that was a lot.
And I talked really fast because I'm
And so
trying
do
to
I.
be cognizant
So
of
my
time.
question is, we're bringing the listening session, but simultaneously, you should be working on what you want the CPAP.
That's exactly right.
We need to know what we need to do legally
Mhm.
to get ourselves, and so that's not up for a debate with the group. Basically, we're saying, we're pulling this out, and then let's find out about everything else. We have to do this part of it.
So I would work simultaneously on this piece based on what we've talked about today, what my observations are using the OAP model. In the meantime, we have the listening session, and I think we just structure how we listen to them.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be good to share, for them to hear from you and from Brian, those public meeting law requirements, what we know our risk and our limitations are. And I think that needs to be part of that listening session conversation with, or maybe after. So how are things going? I'd like to hear from each one of the chairs. What's working in your CAC? What's not? What are your challenges? What aren't? And I can help prep them to be ready for that. I don't show anybody this work until after that listening session, so that I have something to actually bring back for you guys to look at and respond to. And if something comes up, like specifically Brian and I can work on a public records piece, Rachel, we can work on the order piece, we can work on the financial piece.
It feels like it's moving very, very fast for people who are very, very connected to what they currently have. So I think that's my hesitation on a January, February, March kind of, or February, March, April kind of schedule. I'm thinking of the processing time that people are just going to need, and for us to make sure that we've developed very clearly our statement, which is potentially something to the effect of things are going to change
Yeah,
because of our risk, because of risks that we've identified in the current world with public meetings law, with financial management, and with costs, that these three things are driving us toward something where we need to make a change. So it feels like we need to get that really clear and really clearly laid out, the why we are doing this, why now. And they're going to need some time to digest that,
Absolutely.
because it's going to be a big change for them. And then for the listening session, being clear to say, because of these, we will be designing a structure under which we believe we can meet our financial management requirements, our public meetings
Right.
requirements, and match our resource availability to it. We're going to create that. So we need you to understand that as the premise to the listening session. And then from the listening session, what we want to hear about is separate from the land use pieces. What do you love about how you are working together as a community? What are the other functions of this particular group that are not land use specific, that this group currently serves for you, so that we can kind of wrap our heads around those pieces and then work with them to build the model in a place.
Right. I agree, unless you want me, so what I'm thinking about is just the framework without, because all of those things need to happen. Whatever I put together doesn't go anywhere, and we
Right.
shape and shift with all of that work.
Right.
But I'm just thinking, if I'm volunteering to get us all to that starting place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your willingness to take it on.
I think you said basically the same thing I was concerned about. You may have done it with more clarity, but that's what I'm getting at too, is I don't think it's necessary to talk to them about the public meeting law problems, because by doing what we're going to do, by setting up what we need to do to satisfy that, there's no reason to convince them that they need to do it, because I don't think they need to do it for all the other stuff that they'll be doing. So I think that clouds the issue. I think it's right. It's better for us to say, we have to create this, and and then we're gonna work, and this is all the other stuff, but we have to do this, we're doing this. We're doing it because we can explain why we're doing it, but rather than,
Brian said we had to.
Ryan said we had to. And you guys said, we had to do this. But I think we're saying the same thing where
Yes.
that's not a choice for the groups to decide that we're gonna change the structure. We're gonna clean up the structure and change it, and they're gonna be participating in that, but we also don't wanna say, we don't wanna do this.
Right, but I think it's being cognizant and thoughtful of the relationships that you have built,
Yes.
the relationships that exist between these groups and the county, the autonomy they already show, the expertise and that the many members bring to the group, that they're going to feel a whole lot better if they're participatory in this in a way that they feel is meaningful. So I think we want to be thoughtful about when we say listening session, what are we going to do with what they give us in the listening session so we can tell them, so they can feel some agency and ownership in what they're creating. So I guess I feel like we're not quite framed up enough yet. I don't know. Mary Faith, I look to you for a lot of the people focused stuff, because we know for me, I don't spread joy, and I'm not the I'm not the strongest relationships person. I am like a process person. So
I agree with what you said, that people are very attached to their groups and their processes, and that we want to approach this cautiously and thoughtfully and provide and be reassuring. Like, here are the pieces we need to take over because it's too much to ask you to do this. It's too much to ask 8 groups to do this. So here are the pieces we need to take over, and this is how we see that we can do it. And we're so grateful for your work and want to support your work and know what's important to you and what are your goals, et cetera, et cetera. So I agree that the way forward, we should be crafting how to get done what we need to get done in a way that they understand is us supporting them.
Right.
That's excellent.
That's excellent.
You are hereby appointed to the position to tell them that.
It's recorded. Well, yeah.
we'll
That
just
was-
transcribe the
That was
talking
great.
points for the rest.
That
Okay?
changed all what we
Yeah.
just said into what
Yeah.
would be a really good thing to say.
Yeah, because I do think timeline's going to be important. I think it's almost like they need a teaser first. Hey, some things are changing.
You're right.
We're going to set up some listening sessions this spring, late February, early March is spring, right? To really talk with you all about, how we can best support what you going forward and what we're going to have to do with the changing structure to meet these rules. But teasing it a little bit first, and so that you can start to get the feedback so that we can use the feedback to design the listening session.
Mhm. I like that. And there are things like with this CPAC, if we take that approach and stuff, that we can work on. And it might be more than one meeting, right? It might be
Yeah.
2 or 3, because I think there's there's the first introduction, then they have to process it. And then we're going to come back and talk about it, and they're still going to need to process it. And it is protecting those relationships that we value, especially for me, because I have long, very deep relationships with these groups. And I too want to make sure they feel like they're still being taken care of.
I think if this is done right, the fact is, it's gonna show that they're 2 separate things. We're gonna be more supportive of the other things as well because we can separate the 2 at this point. This is a necessary thing, and then we want you to continue all these other things. Maybe having a liaison
And how can we support that to where the validity and the integrity of that work with that widespread community interest remains, and they don't fetter off because people decide they don't make it a priority to attend, right? We
Because
still
it's
want
not
them to be
important
relevant.
anymore.
That's right.
Whereas if they're going to continue to have the support of the county, if they're going to have a county, hopefully a liaison that will show up and things where it's like this continues to be a group that has purpose and importance
Another
for them.
reality is, we shouldn't be part of the land use stuff anyways because of the
No.
exploitation stuff. So this is another reason why can be sold as a better thing, because we can be more involved in these meetings. I've told people, like, I've had to ask Joel, can I go to this meeting in Oceanside during that time? And he's like, no, you can't go to that one, but you can go to this one. And this
Yeah.
makes it even cleaner. Again, goes back to the legalities of us, why we're doing this. so that we are able to go to these other community meetings without the risk of being a part of an ex parte conversation.
So Sarah, do you think it's a conversation you might start with your committee chairs or leadership of each one, just to say, hey, I want to give you a heads up that there's this process that the county's going to undergo, you know, to kind of revision how these groups work in relationship with the county? And, you know, to start that before it's a listening session, again, cognizant of relationship and the people that are going to be very concerned that they're losing
Sure.
that relevancy.
I appreciate that. I think maybe the best approach would be to send them an email so that it's in writing and that information, those comments are not relayed
Absolutely.
secondhand. I will draft that and send that because I think we all need to make sure that it's the right messaging, that, you know, you are the people person. So like your input, especially of, am I sharing the right message of, there are so many things we recognize and value about our CACs. You know, there's things that are working, things that aren't. We want to work together to fix them, to make our community engagement processes the very best they can be, where you feel supported and heard. So we're going to reevaluate, and we'd like to talk to you about
There
all
are
of
some
this.
pieces the county relating to these very specific things
Right.
where the county must create a structure, but
Right.
we value so much everything that this group does that we
Right.
separate from, you know,
Right.
we want to talk with you about the rest of, all the rest of the pieces. I don't want some of your groups to go build us a public meeting structure.
Right.
Make sure it passes the Mary Faith bill.
Yeah.
Seal of approval.
And I think, Paul, I think your example to share in that meeting is a great one. Being a new commissioner, I want to be more involved, but
Mhm.
because of the limitations with the land use focus of these groups, I can't come to all your meetings. So how can we change that to where I can? And they'll be delighted to hear that because, you know, I think they want to see you guys more than they want to see me, at least most of the time, unless they want to talk about land use stuff. So, yeah.
Or they can do that on days other than Saturday.
Yeah. Well, it does. It gives me the opportunity to really think about how I can design some of those meetings or still do them on Saturday, but do them with a specific
But you would
purpose
need
so
to
it's
be
not
at the
so
ones
frequent.
if they weren't focused on land use, or
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to be there.
Right. Right.
That's part of this.
Yeah. And if I can, I would still go, but if it gives me a lot of flexibility both in my work schedule and personal time as well.
Yeah, so I think it's important within the language to indicate that the county is by no means trying to walk away from the support of their communities.
Yeah.
We're just really looking to change how we are doing it and separate how we support land use from how we support their communities, their community overall.
Okay, we
Thank
good?
you all so much.
Maybe
This was-
Brian can be the new liaison to all the groups.
That's a great way for him to get well
Love
known.
that.
Timing's perfect.
Yeah, we're talking about resources? Yeah.
We have weekly updates.
Oh, weekly, we're done with
Well,
that.
yeah, I think we're done.
Sarah, thank you.
Thank you,
all
Sarah.
very
Thank you,
much.
Deborah,
Thank you,
for
Sarah.
being
being here. All right. Yeah, I'll give you my training program. It was show up. Wonderful.
If we have much more to talk about, I need a little break.
Well, do we have any commissioner updates? We can ask that. If we do, we'll take a little break.
I don't know that I do. We kind of talked about stuff this
I
morning.
have one thing and I can say it in 10 seconds. The slide, I found this out because we were asking the
Oh.
slide, 101 slide, I asked Coach Lady, is that in our county? The one down Cascade Head. I think it is. Well, I contacted Mark Buffington and he told me, and I'm going to read it, quote for the public to hear it. So ODOT told me, hi, there's a slide listed at milepost 102.5, which puts it in Tillamook County. There's another slide at milepost 102.9, which puts it in Lincoln
I
County.
thought there was one in each.
I had to check because my district stops at the junction of 130, which is south of Pacific City. So District 4 takes over from 101 from there. So I'm going to I'm reaching out to the District 4, which is managed out of Corvallis, to get updates like we've been getting. Senator Weber and Representative Johnny and I have been getting these,
Yeah.
and Chris has been getting updates. But so it is actually in both counties. So
We were both right.
I told her today, it'll be the only time I tell you we're both right.
I was most right.
And you were mostly
And you were
right.
completely right. We
Well,
were both
you're right.
partially right.
All right,
So we were
that's
just
it.
all right.
Any staff comments? Nothing? Everybody good? Deb, you good? All right. I'm adjourning this meeting at 3:08.
All right,
Thank you all.
thanks, everyone.
Great conversation.
Yeah, that was terrific, Sarah, thanks.
We're still on. We're still on.